Dan has certainly got some questions to ask of his former colleagues as to why he chose the Sunday before the local elections to choose to do this. He could have done it the week after. He could have done it, several months ago. But his timing is quite sort of technical, I suspect. I was about to say acidic. I mean, his timing is very, very difficult for us. There's no doubt about it.
Let me ask you first up, what was your first reaction when you've heard from Dan Poulter that he was walking across the aisle over to the Labour Party?
Well, I was surprised about that bit. I wasn't surprised about the fact that he was talking about not standing in the next general election. He seems to have sort of slightly zoned out of Parliament, I think, and is spending a lot of time doing his NHS work. But I was surprised that he wanted to go to the Labour Party. Immediately people will suspect he may have done a deal with Keir Starmer. Who knows? Time will tell. But he may find himself in the House of Lords. It's always possible.
Well, West Streeting today has been doing the round saying that there has been no deal between Labour and Dan Poulter. But again, as you said, who knows? But what do you make of what he said? He has said that he wasn't able to look at his NHS colleagues in the eye whilst at the same time being a Conservative MP.
Well, we know there's certainly a difficult relationship between the NHS and the Conservative government. We've obviously had a lot of junior doctor strikes. We've had in the past nurses strikes. We've had consultant strikes, although the nurses strikes and consultant strikes have been resolved. But the junior doctor strikes are still going on. Dan will be working with a lot of people who are possibly going on strike. He works, I think, at St Thomas's Hospital, just over the river from Parliament. So it's entirely possible they're giving him quite a hard time about pay issues and all the rest of it.
Do you think that the Conservatives are going to suffer because of Dan Poulton's switch over to Labour? Do you think it's going to affect the party?
Well, it would be dishonest of me to say it's definitely not going to have an effect. I think, though, there are two sides of this. I mean, one of which is our colleagues, our other Conservative members of Parliament, surprised about this, and I think there's no doubt about it. We'd be raising eyebrows about it, but I don't think, it's obvious. As I say, he's sort of slightly checked out of Parliament. He's spending more time doing his NHS work than he is, doing his parliamentary work. But I think there's a wider issue of how the wider public see this, and I think it will be silly of us to try to pretend that this is not going to have some effect. Having said that, it'd be interesting to see what the reaction of his constituents are. At the end of the day, he's a member of Parliament for, I think it's Ipswich North and Mid Suffolk. If they are surprised about this or disappointed about it, they're the ones that are going to tell us. But look, I have to be honest. I mean, it's never good when you see a member of a political party leaving another political party, because of course it creates opportunistic headlines for the party of destination.
Do you know if Dan Poulter reached out to any of his colleagues, perhaps yourself? I know that you shared a committee with him, perhaps to Rishi Sunak himself, before he made this decision. Did he at all reach out to any of his colleagues?
No, he's a perfectly nice chap, and I've always got on very well with him. But he's not what some people would refer to as clubbable. He doesn't spend a lot of time in the tea room chatting to colleagues, whereas many others do. Look, he may well have had a conversation with the Chief Whip and possibly with Rishi Sunak, and possibly the Health Secretary would be another good person for him to speak to. I mean, bear in mind, he was in government back in, I think it was 2012, 2015, as a health minister. So some of the progress where we've got to where we are today is with him as a minister delivering that progress. But as far as I know, I mean, he certainly never reached out to me, and I don't think he reached out to anybody else. I've certainly not heard of anybody saying that he's been having anguished conversations quietly, sort of in the tea room or in the library, trying to work out what his future is going to be. I think, as I say, my guess is that he's probably decided he wanted to go back to medicine and go and do that professionally for the rest of his time, and has sort of checked out of Parliament, probably some time ago.
Well, he says that over the past 2 years, the government has too often put politics of public sector pay ahead of ending strikes with healthcare workers. Do you agree with him?
So I think there are a lot of different issues with this. One of the problems the government has been tackling is this whole issue of inflation. The policy of the government has always been, since Gordon Brown introduced this, that the Bank of England manages inflation through controlling money supply through interest rates. The problem that the government has, and this is where Liz Truss's budget went horribly wrong, is that if you increase money supply fiscally, and that includes giving public sector pay rises, then you put more money into the system, and the Bank of England then has to tighten that money supply with higher interest rates. So the outcome of any public sector wage increase beyond wage inflation is inflationary in itself. So there have been some wider issues, and of course the problem with running a country, with the politics of running a country, is you have everybody's interest to take account of, not just sort of certain sectors. So he would so the government has definitely been looking at that whole wider issue of inflationary pressures, and I think they were right to do that. That said, at the end of the day, we do have public sectors that need to work. We need schools, we need hospitals, police, ambulance, all the rest of it, all need to work. And at the time when we've got other problems barreling our way through an energy crisis, which is now being resolved, but we needed to help households out, COVID and all the rest of it. So it's been a very, very difficult time, and money is tight. And of course, we've now got a situation where the tensions in the world are increasing, and so the budget on the military defense spending has had to go up accordingly. So it is very, very difficult for anybody, and it would be interesting to see if there is a Labour government coming in next, whether they prioritise first junior doctors' pay rises, or whether they look at sort of geopolitical situations and the necessity for spending money on defence.
Dan Poulter's crossing of the floor over to Labour comes at particularly bad timing, of course, because people are going to the polls on Thursday for the local election and some mayoral elections up and down the country. What are your expectations for this Thursday? And do you think that Dan Poulter has made things worse for the Conservatives?
I think Dan has certainly got some questions to ask of his former colleagues as to why he chose the Sunday before the local elections to choose to do this. He could have done it the week after. He could have done it several months ago. But his timing is quite sort of technical, I suspect. I was about to say acidic. I mean, his timing is very, very difficult for us. There's no doubt about it. Will it make any difference? I'm not entirely certain it will do. I mean, look, we all know this is going to be a very difficult election for us. You go back 4 years and the Conservatives were at a high water mark, polling at a high water mark. Now we're polling at a low water mark. So those differences are going to be magnified because of that. And so it is going to be very, very difficult for us. But I think that whether Dan Poulter is Labour or Conservative, I don't think it's going to make a particular amount of difference. Although it may make a difference in his own constituency. That's really where it's going to go. You never know; it may even increase the Conservative vote if he's gone. But we'll have to wait and see until Thursday on that.
But do you suspect that possibly, if the results are as bad as some people predict them to be, do you suspect them to cause a challenge to Rishi Sunak's leadership? I mean, the Sunday papers today are filled with rumours, both about when the election will or won't be, but also people in the wings waiting as interim leaders, as challengers to Rishi Sunak. Do you think that perhaps Dan Poulter's actions this Sunday have maybe encouraged potential challengers to Rishi Sunak after the Thursday election to say, look, this is not working, we need a change?
Well, I think I'll give you two answers to that. The first is I just don't think, nice bloke though he is, and a very hard-working NHS doctor, Dan Poulter is not a leading thought leader in the Conservative Party and amongst parliamentarians. What he decides to do is not something that all of us worry about particularly. If he was a leading light on the back benches, if he was one of the kind of the big chiefs of one of the the five families or whatever, that might be different. But he's not somebody who's going to have that much effect. So that's my first point. My second point really is that I just, all of us think it's a terrible idea having another leadership challenge. I mean, it would just be absolutely bonkers. Although kind of famous last words, as they say. But but I really don't think it's going to happen. I was with Penny Mordaunt being spoken about as being one of the people who maybe sort of put up as a leader. I was with her last week and had a nice chat with her. There's absolutely no question. I know her very well. I've known her for 20 years. There's no question of her sort of quietly asking if I would support her in a leadership bid. There's from where I sit, very much in kind of the moderate One Nation end of the party, I can't see plots going on to try to destabilize Rishi Sunak and try and have another leader. I think it's and I think everybody agrees it would be completely nuts at this stage to try and do that.